to see it, but if you do, have a look on the University of Newcastle's website. It's a really, Lyndall Ryan has been doing a whole lot of work, and you can get a visual sense of the massacre sites. As far as we know, it's early days still. In a couple of years, we'll be asked to celebrate 250 years since Cook landed, that'll happen in 2020. As we were asked to celebrate the 200 years since Captain Phillip landed in 1788, and as we are asked to celebrate Australia Day annually. In 2017, Kathleen said I work with Westpac on their reconciliation work, and I attended the celebration of their 200-year anniversary. They had 200 scholarships. It was they made a really fantastic contribution to scholarship, and they were celebrating their 200-year anniversary, and they began as the Bank of New South Wales, begun by Governor Lachlan Macquarie, and the statue graces the north end of Hyde Park. In that same week, I went out to Campbelltown Campbelltown Art Gallery, where we launched an amazing exhibition. I wish it was a standing exhibition still. It was called With Secrecy and Dispatch. And it's a direct quote from the language that Governor Macquarie used in his term, same term he had here, starting the Bank of New South Wales, the language he used to order the massacre of the Aboriginal people at Appin in the Campbelltown region. It was an amazing exhibition. Canadians and Aboriginal people here got together and responded to the stories of the traditional owners. Appin is probably one of these, I'd say. So in that same moment, as an Aboriginal person, I was asked to go and be part of this work, this organisation's work, where they're celebrating the way they got a start in the country. And at the same time, I'm there bearing witness, along with the artists and the other people, in this commemoration of the driving of women and children off cliffs, of the murdering of women and children, and men, women and children, with secrecy and dispatch. I had a very dear German friend who used to say, Robynne, you have to have a laughing eye and a crying eye. And I've learned from that we need to hold complexity. We need to be able to hold both stories. We need to be able to hold the violent truth in the one hand and its legacy in all forms in the other hand. And hope for great national success as we need to hold the violence in one hand, the violent truth, and the hope for a really successful nation in the other. We have a couple of opportunities to do that now, and can we just move one more? Thank you. Thanks. There's a couple of opportunities now to do that. And both of them are underpinned by these really important human rights principles, the principle of self-determination and the principle of free, prior and informed consent. We've had a long history of being managed and told what is good for us. A long history of over-regulation and control of where we could live, who we could marry, whether we could raise our own children, whether we could work, and so much more. These principles are really, really important to the solutions. And Kathleen talked previously about the St Vincent Paul's Society's Reconciliation Action Plan. They are a wonderful vehicle for partnership, and I commend reading it, have a look at it. It's a great thing, and congratulate everybody who's worked on it, because they do take work, they take thought, they take institutional change. And they provide a great framework for increasing cultural knowledge within an institution, for recruiting and retaining Indigenous staff, and for guiding also external work. And they are always about relationships. They're about less transactional approaches and much more about building relationships and building partnerships. And I think in my experience, one of the really important things about successful RAPs is to listen to what Aboriginal people in New South Wales and Torres Strait Islanders, but mostly Aboriginal people, are telling you, and to actually hear that. So not just to listen and go, that's, because we've had well-intentioned people go, that's very interesting, but we're kind of doing this, and we're going to do is to listen and actually really hear, and then to implement, and importantly to resource. It remains a big challenge for all RAPs, and particularly for community-based NGOs, to resource the initiatives that are required to give effect to the RAP, and then also to be able to report, to have that accountability. One of the opportunities that does exist at the moment is this discourse around the statement, the Uluru Statement. The Uluru Statement comes from a particular process. It came from what a democratic process described as a deliberative process. It's a method for decision making that's fundamentally based on the principle of free, prior, informed consent. And the vehicle for this process was a series of dialogues across the country with representatives from different areas. Not everybody got a say, not everybody was there, but it was the best process they could come up with at the time to get representation in and have a conversation. The dialogues came at the end of a long process and a campaign to warm Australians to the idea of recognising First Peoples in the founding document. The idea of recognising and reconciling has a long history, and I think back on Mr. Jimmy Clements, who travelled from Tumut actually in 1927, an 80-year-old Aboriginal man when Parliament opened. He was there. He travelled by foot from Tumut to Canberra at 80 years of age to see what was going on. What is this governance? What is this governance that he now had imposed on him? The 1938 day of mourning here in Sydney, the Yirrkala Bike petitions, the Virunga Statement, and early constitutional forums in the early 2000s. We've been engaged in thinking about this for a long time. More recently, there was also, as part of this process that ultimately ended up in the Uluru Statement, expert panel, parliamentary committees, and a publicly funded campaign to raise awareness around the issue of constitutional recognition. The issues around this that the expert panel considered, that the parliamentary committee considered, are fundamentally legally complex. There's no getting away. Some of them are really straightforward, and some of them are really complex, and we can't say, to some extent there are questions around what changing the constitution, the effect of the impact of that would actually have, because we know that even the 1967 referendum, when the Commonwealth got the power to legislate for Aboriginal people, the High Court interpreted that change as meaning that the Commonwealth is quite entitled to legislate in a way that is detrimental to the interests of Aboriginal people. So the complexity of our parliamentary and court systems don't guarantee the outcome that we might like to see. Significant campaign was launched though, to many of you probably saw parts of it, to raise awareness, and there were lots of young passionate people trying to raise awareness about it, and but without a proposition. There wasn't a proposition to take out to people, say, well, this is despite saying that politicians say there's bipartisan support for this, they couldn't go out and say, this is unlike in 1967, they couldn't go out and say, this is the proposition that you're going to be asked to vote on, because nobody really knew what it was going to be. There was an opposition from a lot of Aboriginal people, and there was grave concern that the founding document of the coloniser in fact can't provide real recognition. And while it's self-evident that constitutional recognition can't actually fix urgent things that things we urgently need fixed, like the rates that our children are being removed, the rates that we are put in custody, and we are not a highly criminalised people. Again, it is systemic. There are systemic reasons for that, and the extent to which we are also now dying in custody again. Symbolic or even full changes in the Constitution weren't going to fix those very urgent things that are really so important to us and that need changing urgently to stop our children going, our young people dying, and those things that are just heartbreaking and wrong in our community. And it also, that discussion about constitutional recognition also occurred during that period. I don't know if you think back to the time when there was this, were we going to change the Racial Discrimination Act? Were we going to amend it so that it would be less restrictive and race hate speech would be freed up again? And I think we need to really watch those discussions. You know, we saw the government vote for Pauline Hanson's bill recent, or I don't even know what it was actually, you know, that it's okay to be white. That there was an administrative error and the entire parliament, well not the entire parliament, the government voted for that. How does that happen? How is that happening in this country? That, you know, in 1975 passed a Racial Discrimination Act. It's being chipped away at. It's being chipped away at apparently while they're not even looking. Anyway, so the Uluru Statement essentially calls for three things. That's an excerpt from it: voice of Parliament, Makarata, so treaty making and truth telling. Now I'm going to leave the politics of the first two others, but the truth telling is a really important, uncontentious thing that we need to do. What if the state was actually, what if our state and our governments were actually really willing to look back truthfully, to own the way in which allegedly the state acquired sovereignty, to own the full inventory and facts of the massacres, the diseases, the dispossession from the means of production, the ongoing removal of children, the heavy-handed policing and brutal conduct of corrective officers as the numbers of deaths in custody rise. You can Google the footage of men who've been crushed to death, men who had diabetes and have been crushed to death as they are being restrained by our custodial officers. It is awful. Nobody is held to account for this. Our coronial processes don't bring anyone to account for this. These are failures of the past and present day failures. What if the state was really willing to stand up, face the racist backlash, because there will be if we actually tell the truth about what's happening. All the shock jocks will go off their heads. They go off their heads now. They'll absolutely, you know, there'll be a big reaction if the truth is told. We also, not just to tell the history of the suffering, we're focusing these days also on a really strength-based discourse. The truth would include the stories of survival, achievement, thriving, knowledge, creativity, innovation,